Good evening, everyone. The Sport in Limerick Soccer Podcast, where we're joined by our usual analysts, Noel O'Connor and Jason O'Connor. Jason has returned to us after a very brief hiatus a couple of weeks ago. Is it good to be back, Jason?
It is, Adrian. I missed yourself and Noel. I missed the chats. 2-week break from work. So for me, work is football. So needed a complete break from it, but good to be back.
Yeah, we can understand that. I heard there was pictures on Instagram floating around of you having a sangria on the side of a pool in the Caribbean. I'm not so sure if that's true.
No, definitely not. The Cliffs of Moher now was as far as it went, lads.
I suppose back to reality. Unfortunately, this week we have a massive game for Treaty United senior men's side, Jason. They host Athlone Town. There's 6 points between the two sides. Obviously, we'll go into that in a couple of minutes as well about the fact that Treaty have a far superior goal difference, but Friday night offers the opportunity to throw away any doubt that this team will be in the playoffs. A huge opportunity for Treaty now at home in front of their own sport.
Yeah, massive, Adrian. And it's been a great season. There's no doubt about that. The lads have massively overachieved, Tommy and the group. We've looked at it week by week here and probably astonished at times that the results they've got and the performances they've put in have been a breath of fresh air, Adrian, really, for me. They've approached the games properly. They've went about trying to manage games and win games. It's been hard to beat. We've said it all season. The kind of record and the form has been built on disciplinary, defensive work, I suppose, really. We know their disciplinary record has been poor, but their defensive discipline has been very, very good over the season. And bar a couple of results, they haven't shipped too many goals. Ty Grind has been excellent, as we know, and the back four, and they haven't overplayed and have been very, very good. So it's an opportunity for the supporters to come out, I suppose, and show their appreciation of the work that Tommy and the players have done throughout the season and his backroom staff. And I think, Adrian, a point will probably do it. I suppose they would still keep it dangling, but Athlone will have aspirations themselves. They won't have thrown in the town just yet. They'll be hanging in there in the hope, I suppose, that Bray drop points and they can turn Treaty over. But you rightly said it's a great opportunity for the local team to kind of cement that playoff position.
Yeah, I know that Bray and all will be looking over their shoulders even slightly more than Treaty. That's quite important to point out, but coming from a Treaty point of view and looking at it maybe from the most negative aspect, obviously it's not mathematically done yet, but surely with the goal difference that's there between Treaty and Athlone, that it would be, almost impossible for Athlone to catch Treaty, you'd imagine.
Absolutely, yeah, and Jason touched on the defensive solidity of Treaty. So, I think it's 17 or 18 goals. It could even be more. Like, it's hard to believe that Treaty are going to concede maybe 10 goals and Athlone score another 10. So, and I suppose the danger, if it is a danger, because the one thing you do want is a bit of momentum going into playoffs. And it's a match between Athlone and Treaty, but it's really a match between Athlone and Bray. And it's again, we looked at teams and the wind going out of their sails. I watched the Athlone Shelburne game, as Treaty didn't have a game last week, and they were bright enough in the game. I thought that Shelburne looked a bit leggy. Obviously, they celebrated their title win, I'd say, for a few days before they got back to training. And they had a couple of great chances in the last 5 or 6 minutes at Lone. And I suppose the one thing that has happened since Paul Doolan has got there is that they're certainly not conceding goals at the rate that they were. I think they are going to be up for this game. Obviously, they want to beat Treaty, but not really in a direct show of Treaty. But I'd say they feel if they can get 3 points on Friday night, well, then it's really going to put the big pressure on Bray, and they probably still think they have a realistic chance of making the playoffs, although if they do, it certainly won't be at Treaty's expense.
Yeah, certainly not. You'd imagine, although we don't like to count our chickens too quickly in Limerick. Anything can happen in football and all that, but hopefully that would be totally impossible. Jason, I suppose you touched on this already, but obviously there's been points of the season where Treaty, you know, they maybe lost 4-1 at home to Cavantilly, which was maybe a disappointing result. And we said maybe they've been a bit open and they need to go back to basics. But have you been happy in terms of recent weeks, how, despite the fact that they haven't been winning a lot of games, they got a very important 0-0 draw in Galway, important 0-0 draw at home to Cork as well, and then we're narrowly beaten against Shelbourne, how they've went back to, as you said, maybe back to basics and being really hard to beat at probably the right time, because that's an important ingredient going into a playoff campaign as well.
Yeah, definitely. Like, we asked them to reset. That's the way we put it, Adrian, because as I said, that's kind of what the season has been based on, you know, not playing in the wrong areas, been hard to beat, not giving up chances, effective at set pieces, and they have gone back to that. You know, you rightly said, you know, 3 draws and a win and a defeat in the last 5. They're not scoring goals. That would be the only worry for me, I suppose, Adrian. You know, no goals in the last 3, 4 goals in the last 5 games, and 3 of them came against Cove. So that's a little bit of a worry. Kieran Hanlon's fitness would concern me, because he's the only kind of out-and-out striker that we have, unless, I suppose, Dean George is gonna make an appearance. He's been very, very unlucky with injuries all season. We saw him on the bench recently, and he could be an option coming into the playoffs, and a very, very good one, because in the couple of games I saw him in the Treaty colours, he certainly did impress me. You'd hope, obviously, that Sean Gearns would return. He's been out for quite a while now, you know, and while Mark Walsh has done fantastic in that centre-back position, you'd love just to have a full-strength Treaty side going into the playoffs, so they can give of their best, Adrian. That's really all we want from them. But to answer your question, yeah, I've been happy with them. To know they've become hard to beat again. They're not giving up chances. They're not conceding too many. And I don't mean to sound critical when I say they're not scoring, but in the same breath, they're not conceding too many. And we know, look, they're a match for anybody in this division on their day. They've proven that in the games against Shelbourne, Galway and UCD, the 3 teams above them in the table. They've proved that all year, you know. And Athlone, I suppose, under Paul Doolan, 9 points returned out of a possible 15 since he took over from Aidan Carberry. Noel quite rightly said the defensive side of things has improved. And on their day, they have threats. We know that. Aidan Freeze, Stephen Meany, you know, very, very good players, and they have a good squad, Glenn Macaulay, but they just haven't fired at the right times at Athlone, and they'll look at their season and they'll be disappointed. You know, they really will if they don't make the playoffs.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Noel. I was going to bring that up later, but now that Jason has mentioned it, just a point on Athlone. We'll say, you know, they have, obviously, if they do beat Treaty and Bray don't get a good result, it goes down to the final day, they're in with a chance. But overall, considering maybe the hype from Athlone themselves at the start of the season and from a lot of their players, do you think that it'll be disappointing for them if they don't reach the playoffs this year?
I think so, yeah. And look, Jan knew my feelings earlier on about Athlone. I did expect them to, you know, to struggle, and they did certainly struggle after 5 games. And I suppose my basis for saying that the struggles would continue is I didn't actually see them bringing in, you know, someone of the caliber of Paul Doolan after Aidan Carberry left. Normally in those situations in the first division, like, the budget is kind of slashed. A lot of the known players are gone, and you know, the under-19s are put on show for the last 10 or 12 games of the season. Now Athlone haven't done that. They obviously went out and got Paul Doolan, and they kept that squad together. Look, and the results have come up. And look, I think they're still in with a really, really good chance of catching Bray. Again, I repeat it, I can't see them dislodging Treaty, but I think that they have a 50-50 chance probably of dislodging Bray. I think they'll come down, you know, with real intent. It is the last chance saloon, you know, and it may be a difficult game for Treaty from the point of view that, you know, no matter what you say, it's very, very unlikely that Treaty are going to lose out. So it's not really a straight shootout between the two of them. And it's going to be a difficult enough game, I think, for Treaty on Friday night.
Yeah, it certainly will be. Jason, one thing we said at the start of the season that was going to be vital for Treaty in their maiden season in the first division was the home form. You know, they had a couple of defeats, but it's fair to say that they've got some vital results. You think of Willie Armshaw grabbing the game by the scruff of the neck against Bray. They win that game. You see them, Willie Armshaw again scoring in the last minute against Shelbourne, a brilliant goal. Treaty have, even when they haven't been playing against Wexford again, there's another example, hadn't been playing well. They've seemed to either win matches when draws would have been very acceptable and maybe draw matches when it looked like they were going to lose. That was all very important for them as well this year.
Definitely, Adrian. You know, they've got momentum early on. You know, even Bray, the first game of the season, we know it was away, and you're speaking about the home form, but probably deserved, I suppose, on the balance of play not to get anything and came away with a point. And as the weeks ticked along and the games ticked along and they were picking up points and picking up victories, the belief kind of came into the team. It really did. And it was their approach play, Adrian, really, that was the platform for the results that they've got. You know, myself and Noel said it, in this division, you got to play in the right areas. You can't be gifting chances to people by overplaying. And Treaty went through a little spell of that, but they soon dispersed it again. And that's really the basis for the results that they've got. It looks like in all the games this season, Treaty set up as if they're going to play for a draw. And then with probably 10, 15 minutes to go, they empty the bench and they change the tactics, whether it takes them to go a goal behind or whether they sense a bit of blood and they push on and that leads to results for them, you know. And as I said, they've got the momentum. I think it's 3 home defeats out of the 6, Adrian, correct me if I'm wrong, which is a fantastic return, really, if that's the case. But look, goals conceded, you can see it, you know, are small for Treaty, you know, 32 conceded, probably up there, I suppose. 24, my apologies, goals against 24. It's in the top 3 in the league, you know, and that's the platform. For to look at a player of the year, I suppose Ty Grine will be up there. Mark Walsh will be up there. They're the 2 ones for me, I suppose, really. And Ty, obviously, the keeper, and Mark Walsh, defender and defensive midfielder, you know. So Tommy has done a really, really good job, Adrian. There's no doubt about that. The game management has been fantastic. As I said, look for that clean sheet, keep a clean sheet, stay in the game for long enough, then spring people like Willie Armstrong from the bench, change your approach for kind of the last 15, 20 minutes of games. And it's been fantastic to watch and they've got great results.
Yeah, Jason mentioned all there about, you know, the approach to the games they played overall this season. I suppose just being specifically on Friday night, how do you expect Treaty to approach the game with Athlone?
Certainly the exact same as the last few weeks. I think they'll be very solid. They won't show a lot of ambition, certainly at the start. You know, I think Athlone will probably come at them a little bit. And look, they should be confident enough in terms of scoring goals. They scored a good few goals, albeit an Athlone team with a different mindset in the last game away from home against them. But I was never madly impressed by the Athlone defence. I thought they had a lot more going forward maybe than, and even, you know, when Aidan Carberry was under pressure, I was surprised that he was signing kind of attacking midfielders and not getting a couple of defenders in the squad. So I think Treaty will sit nice and tight. They'll have their midfield in place. They'll be very solid, particularly when Athlone are in their half. And they look to break and counter-attack and certainly make an impact from set plays. But I don't see any deviation from what has really been successful for them for most of this season.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there. At the time of recording, Jason, we're not fully sure what way Treaty are injury-wise. I know that Niall Connolly will definitely be ruled out of the game with a sprained ankle, I believe. That was picked up in training last week. So that's one injury. We probably expect Jack Lynch to be back, who missed the game in Dublin. So, you know, outside that, I think Matt McKevitt is off a bit, and Sean Gearns, while back in training, is also off. From the team that you saw in recent weeks, and I suppose maybe particularly against Shelbourne, do you expect to see any changes, or do you want to see any changes, Jason, from that?
No, I suppose, look, Stephen Christopher, Tommy has persevered with him a little bit. We spoke about Joel Custrain in the past, and you know my opinion on that, Adrian. It's kind of one or the other. I don't think you can play both of them players on the wings if you're certainly going to look for something out of the game. You know, I think Matt Keane has to play. He really does. He's been excellent. So if he's available, he'll play. Sean McSweeney you'd expect to play in the 10. Is Kieran Hanlon fit? Is he fit enough to play? Will you get 90 minutes out of him? He hasn't looked fit for a while for me. Mark Ludden back in, I suppose, at left back. And as I've said all year, Anto O'Donnell picks himself. Mark Walsh picks himself. Callum McNamara, for me, has been fantastic when he's been in the team. And Charlie Fleming, I know Noel has his doubts about him, and I can see why, don't get me wrong. But he's been solid over the season for me. He's had a couple of blips, but he's been solid. Joe Collins, anytime he's been called on, hasn't let the side down either. So there is options there, Adrian. Adrian, and one thing you're guaranteed from this group is that whoever Tommy puts out on the pitch, they're going to give it all for the jersey and they're going to give it all for the fans. So, look, it's important that the shape is right. Noel said it. We don't gift anything easily. And because there's so much at stake for Athlone, the longer the game goes at 0-0, the more frustrated they'll get and they'll have to come out. And then, as I said, the last 15, 20 minutes, Treaty could look at opening them up.
Yeah, and there's one little thing. Let me be clear here, Noel. I'm not putting words in anyone's mouth, but there is a few Treaty players, and I won't name them, that are on yellow cards, that you're talking one more and you'd possibly be out of a playoff if it went on any further than the next couple of games. If you were the manager, would there be any encouragement in saying you may go out there and get yourself booked before the final game of the regulation season?
I don't know, to be honest with you. I suppose I haven't really experienced myself. I know that, we've seen it, obviously. I think the best man for that trick was Jose Mourinho, I think. And I just think with the referees that you're dealing with, telling a fella to get a yellow card in one of these matches, anything could happen, I think. I think it's very easy getting without telling them anyway. So I'm not so sure that'll come into your mind. So listen, you'll have a word with the guy and say, listen, you're only one card away from suspension. You need to be careful out there, but you've got to go out and play still, and you don't want to see guys holding back or, so there could be a word about it in the dressing room, but I'm not so sure that I'd be trying to do anything deliberate on it.
Yeah, you'd almost be better off not dwelling on a situation like that or bringing it to light at all, I suppose, to be fair. Just to go on, I suppose, to the prediction side of it, Jason, it's a big night. It's not just a big night in the Marks Field, it's a big night in general, obviously, for even UCD. They're at home to Cork, but a game I did assign for yourself would be Galway and Wexford. Galway have pulled away in the end. They're 6 points, but I think ahead of UCD, 7 ahead of Treaty. They have pulled away and made second place their own. As it turns out, there's 2 legs in the opening stages of the playoffs, so it doesn't give you an unbelievable advantage in the opening stages. But Galway at home to Wexford, I suppose a word on Wexford too, as we've been waxing lyrical, have made a lot of improvements, so it's no gimme for Galway on Friday.
No, it isn't. We've spoke about Wexford at length, I suppose, and they've improved steadily over the season. We can see it. 3 wins, Adrian, in the last 5, and very impressive at times. Their football has been excellent, I suppose, but no one speaks about momentum, and I do listen to what he says. He's a very experienced man, and so is John Caulfield, and he won't want. They're on a 4-game unbeaten run, Galway are. They'll want to continue that run, so I can't see Galway slipping up, but I expect them to win.
And that's 1 home win. Would you expect similar at the Belfield Bowl? No, you've got UCD taking on Cork. We know now Cork are certainly building for next year and have been strong for the whole second half of the season, to be fair to them. Another game that's certainly going to be very, very tough for the home side on Friday. Yeah,
and found UCD really, really hard to predict as well. They've been probably the most unpredictable team in the league. And you see Cork winning last week 4-0. So obviously, there'll be a lot of momentum there. He's spoken about next season and building a squad and strengthening the team and that. And I think it'll be a difficult night for UCD. And I wouldn't be surprised if Cork won that match.
Yeah, and Jason, you've got Bray and Cavan Teely. We did mention that Whatever about Treaty United, Bray Wanderers were going to be looking over their shoulders somewhat against Athlone Town. They might even be looking at it thinking that Treaty might already feel they're in the playoffs, so they'd be worried about what their mindset would be like, although they probably shouldn't be, to be fair, going into the game at home against Athlone. They have Kevin Teely, a team we've said at length, like Noel said, very hard to predict as well this season. They could turn up and beat Bray 3-0. We just don't know.
That's it. We don't know. Very, very hard to predict. They're a match for anybody, I suppose, and they've been difficult for Treaty to handle. We've seen that throughout the season, but they're on a very, very poor run, Adrian. They haven't got a win now in 5. But look, Bray are just as unpredictable. They've probably the better squad on paper. We know that, but have they underachieved? You'd expect Bray to be safe in the playoffs now. I didn't expect them to go straight up, but I did tip them for the playoffs, and I would expect them to be higher up in the table than they are now, and they don't want to go into the last game. So looking at Bray and Kevin Teely, look, if I'm a betting man, I'll go for Bray, but very, very difficult to predict.
Yeah, and the final game is going to be equally as predictable. Noel, you got the wrong end of the stick, I suppose, and that you probably got the most dead rubber game that we've had to predict all season in Cove Ramblers hosting Shelbourne at St. Coleman's Park. I know that we talk about building teams for following seasons and the likes, but with Shelbourne already wrapping up the league and how miserable a year it's been for Cove, it's very hard to predict this one.
Yeah, would you just feel like, okay, I think maybe that Shelbourne, they might have calmed down a small bit on the socialising this week maybe. And I think that, they just have too many good players, and they have the option to bring on guys as well, or bring guys in, who and they have that real goal threat as well. And we've watched Cove a lot, and I just think they're quite poor, and I think Shelbourne will be good enough to win that game.
Yeah, and we move on to a section of the show which is based on the Limerick junior soccer scene, Jason. Obviously, we'd like to discuss it in more detail, but with the amount of games that are played every week, we normally just specify one or two games, particularly in the FAI Junior. You've got an all-Premier clash between Coona and Pike. That's going to be a test for Pike, you'd imagine. In fairness to Coona, in the league last week, they came off in a 3-2 defeat, very tight game. Unlucky, I believe, to be fair, to come out on the end of the defeat there. So Pike Rovers will know they're facing the game on Sunday.
Oh, they definitely will. That was against Ashling and Coddy, Adrian, last week with Coona. Yeah, and they certainly gave them a scare and they ran them close. And if we're to look at it in that sense, I suppose the couple of games Ashling have played against Pike have been very, very close. But you go back a week previous then, and Janesborough drew with Coona. So especially the junior scene, it's even harder to predict results, I suppose. But look, if I was a betting man, I'd be backing Pike Rovers this season. They're for silverware. They really have impressed me the couple of times I've seen them. They've been a match for anybody that they've played, and they've got firepower. They're scoring goals, and look, they've got quality. We know about Steve McGann. We know about Shane Walsh. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago how impressed I was with Owen Hanrahan and his fitness. And they've a massive squad that Robbie Williams seems to be handling really, really well. There's no negative vibes coming out of Crossagalla. They really are kind of on a crest of a wave, and they're sitting pretty in the league as well. And after defeating Ashling in the FEI, they'll be quietly confident of going all the way, Adrian, and I'd love to see them do it. So they'll be favourites for me against Coona on Sunday. It won't be easy, but I'd expect Pike to overcome them.
Yeah, I know there are another few games, Jason, likes of Regional A team playing Fairview B, which will definitely be a test for Regional A as well, with how good Fairview B have been in the division below, or top of that league, actually. But one of the games we're going to focus, the second game we're going to focus on, involves one of your former clubs, Janesborough. They travelled to Kilmallock. Considering we'll say Kilmallock have actually shown recent form that they can compete, Jason. They've lost 2-1 to Regional last weekend in a tight encounter, but they also picked up a win in the Tui Cup against Nina, showing signs that they can compete, and they haven't been beaten by a lot of goals that we've seen at the start of the year. But this is absolutely huge for both sides.
Well, it is massive, Adrian. There's no doubt about that. We know about Kilmallock. We know the squad they've picked from, because it hasn't changed much over a number of seasons. And look, we both know they're waiting on a couple of lads to come back from playing GA and playing hurling, and when they return, they will be strong. So they'll be looking to stay within touching distance of Janesborough. You know, we've said it for a couple of weeks that it's probably Janesborough, Geraldines and Kilmallock, you know, and you look at Geraldines last week getting turned over by Charleville. I think it was 5-0, and the alarm bells.
Goals, conceded.
Yeah, the alarm bells must be ringing for the Gary Owen outfit, you know. So Kilmallock will fancy their chances, you know. Speaking to a couple of lads close to the Janesborough camp, their numbers aren't great, Adrian. They're struggling to get a team out, and they've only had kind of 11 or 12 turning up for the last couple of weeks, which is worrying for them. It really is. When you consider where the B team is, they can't really pull from that. They don't have a youth team to pull from either. And look, that's the kind of structural stuff that the club themselves need to address, because this is a massive game. But I suppose when you consider the top six, bottom six split, they're both going to have to play each other again twice. But Kilmallock will fancy it, Adrian. I know James will beat them out there earlier in the season already, but if I was a betting man, as I keep saying, I'd nearly go for Kilmallock this Sunday.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be an interesting one. Noel, just to switch from the Limerick junior scene to the international scene, there was great excitement, I suppose, considering our record in terms of international recognition with players. We're going to claim Chiedozie Ogbene as almost one of our own after playing a full season with Limerick FC in 2017. It was great for him to get off the mark, and also great for Stephen Kenny to get his first competitive win with the 3-0 win over Azerbaijan ahead of what will be tonight's game against Qatar.
Yeah, and he's been impressive in his few cameos before Saturday night as well. Ogbene and his, you know, obviously we're on before the Qatar game. We don't know how it goes, but we know he's starting that one, and I think that's great. Obviously we hadn't seen him like in the flesh, if you like, for a few years, but he certainly filled out. Thought his header was very, very impressive, and we know his pace. And there's probably a bit of upside in him yet, and maybe the international scene will maybe get him a move higher up the league. But look, it was great to get the win. Just need to relax a little bit now. Obviously, you'd like to see him win today, and you know, with 6 points on offer in November, they probably need to go looking, you know, and try and get 4 out of 6 there, and hopefully Ireland can progress from then. But look, it's been a difficult time, and it was nice to see him get that win and a clean sheet.
Yeah, certainly. And Noel, just to stick with yourself on. There was probably disappointing news in Treaty United today in the fact that senior women's manager Niall Connolly departed his role. It's been a very difficult season for Treaty United senior women's side. They find themselves at the foot of the table, 4 points adrift of Cork City. And okay, there has been positives at times in terms of we've had a lot of young players capped at underage international level, and they have a lot of years left in them at League of Ireland level, but it just goes to show that, you know, it is a results business, and results have been disappointing in the last 2 to 3 months for the side.
Yeah, it's difficult. Look, it's never easy. There's probably a sense of relief for Niall as well. It's obviously been difficult. You know, they took some really, really heavy blows, if you like. There's some very, very strong teams in that league. Obviously, like the Wexford and Shelburne and Peamount, just to name a few. I probably thought maybe at the start, looking at it in hindsight, that you know, he was a bit inexperienced to take that job. It was probably a bigger job that most people would think. You know, obviously he brought in a Limerick under 13 side to a national final. But look, he's very young, and hopefully he bounces back and he learns a bit. You know, because it is a results business, and you got to find a way to win. And you know, the best teams have their own way of playing, if they have the bigger budgets or whatever. But the rest of the teams just have to find a way to win. And I think that he was quite principled in the way he wanted to play. And sometimes you have to lose those and be a bit more pragmatic and try to get a